Okay, there we go. All right, so we are live. All right, so my name is Brandon Oliver. Everybody, thank you for joining us today. Um, and with me is Superintendent Toscano, and we'll be going over the teacher update. Um, Let me just make absolutely sure, real quick, Superintendent Toscano, before uh, we start. Let's see, because it's showing 0 viewers, so I just want to make sure it's streaming.
Okay.
Uh, Okay.
So I'm getting text that folks are on and we are streaming.
Okay. Yes, there we go. Okay. It updated the number. All right. So, all right, let's start over again. My name is Brandon Oliver, and thank you for joining us for this teacher update. And with me is Superintendent Toscano. And Mr. Toscano, I will let you go ahead.
Thank you, Brandon, and faculty and staff across the district. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for this conversation. Up front, I want to apologize to you for not having done this sooner. The information, as you can imagine, has been changing weekly, most of the time daily, and oftentimes hourly. And we're at the point now where we feel like we've got some pretty definitive information to share with you today. You've been really great about sending questions and inquiries all along the way. I know that your principals reached out to you guys yesterday and asked if you had any questions that you would like me to address, and I have received dozens. And in my discussion with you today, I intend to answer all of those as they can be answered today. So with that, the protocol for today is that I'm going to spend quite a bit of time providing a really big overview of all of the variables that are at play here, that are driving the decisions that we're making, but also that are informing the context that we are within and where our role is as the education entity for the East Central community and as educators in the greater San Antonio community and in our country. So with that, I also want to start by saying thank you to you all for handling the spring with grace and professionalism. We got blindsided, all of us, by that condition of closure, and we responded in ways that I felt really revealed our character and our commitment to the education of children in this community and also to one another. We also find ourselves in a conundrum. I think about an excerpt from a speech Winston Churchill once gave, where he mentioned something to the effect of that he felt he was in an enigma wrapped inside of a riddle with information ever changing and often unavailable. And that's what keeps coming to mind of late for me. I also want you to know that the gravity of this situation is not being taken lightly. It is not being taken lightly for me in my role and what my obligation is to you, to the children of the East Central community and its families. And I also want you to know that the decisions within which I have options to make exist very few perfect decisions. In fact, there are no perfect decisions. And please understand that it is my role to fight for higher ground where the most folks' needs can be met. And I'm running out of options to make sure that all folks' needs are met with every decision. And then lastly, that all that we're doing since the pandemic ensued and going forward is going to be based on trust, specifically your trust in me. And I want you to know that it is my responsibility directly to earn your trust. Now let's take a deep breath. Most of you are going to agree with what I have to say today. I know that in my heart. I've been around here too long and around too many of you too long. I know that some of you are going to understand and you're going to appreciate the clarity and the intent behind the decisions. You'll still have some concerns, but you'll understand. And a few of you, no matter what I say today, no matter the decisions that have been made and the decisions that are going to have to be made going forward, are going to be satisfied with anything I say. And I understand that and I respect that. I also know that each and every one of you have and will continue to remain professional as you offer input, as you ask questions, and as you represent all of us as educators, as East Central ISD employees in the broader community that includes social media. Please know that district and campus leadership and I spent the last 2 days planning, thinking, adjusting, and ultimately landing on all of the details of the decisions that have been made that you will hear about today. And for that reason, they're a great resource for you for the most current and up-to-date information going forward. Additionally, I think that it would be wise for you and I in a platform that is like this in real time to have frequent conversations now and for as long as we need to ensure full transparency and to keep the lines of communication open so that we all know that all of our concerns are on the table, that we're doing the best we can to address all of them, and that when we make decisions, we all understand why we made those decisions, and that ultimately we're all informed and that we can trust in the information we're hearing. Whether we agree with it or not may be a different story, but at least we're all on the same page and we all have the same information. And I feel like this is the most effective way to do it. That being said, keep in mind that all correspondence will be communicated through all of the channels that are available to us. The safety of our students first, and us as staff second, is our utmost priority. The pandemic is real and it is being taken seriously. And to the extent we can decipher from all of the conflicting information that we're receiving, we're going to rely on science and medicine and avoid politics driving our decisions. One thing that I know we all agree on as educators is that this public health crisis, it cannot become a public education crisis. In the most recent CDC report, which I read this morning, all of the health experts from the CDC to local and state health officials and pediatricians at the state and national level line up on this big conclusion. And that is that the short and long-term developmental risk, academically, physically, social-emotionally, for our children far outweigh the risk of COVID-19. And that the damage that our children are experiencing in all of those aspects of their being are magnified if they come from poverty, if their families are impoverished, and if they come from communities in which poverty is an elevated percentage. And I want to remind you that in East Central Independent School District, upwards of 7 out of 10 households are qualifying for free and reduced lunch, which means they're at or below the poverty line. 7 out of 10 families, on average, if they are in a household, come from a household size of 4, having total household income of $45,000 or less, which means statistically, our community is at risk, and our children are going to experience the worst long and short-term damage the longer that we are not able to connect with them and provide not only education, but all of the services that we provide children and their families. We also know that we never shut down. We had essential staff in March when the initial pandemic broke and orders came down to close, minus essential employees. We delivered food. We cleaned our buildings and kept them up. We maintained our facilities. All of us got paid because payroll never left, even if it meant working long into the night and into the weekends. And when we were allowed to, particularly as of June 1, when our campus staff broke for summer, everybody returned, and we haven't left since. And we have implemented and continued to adapt our return to work protocols. And I am happy to report that while we have had some instances of COVID exposure and even some positive COVID diagnosis, we have not had one confirmed case that was transmitted at work. All of the cases of exposure and all of the cases of transmission to this point in our district came from outside exposure and transmission. In addition, the most recent CDC guidance, which I know you can hear conflicting data when interpreted by epidemiologists locally or in different areas of the country, but in regards to the CDC's compilation and in inferences from the data from virus and antibody testing, they're concluding as recently as yesterday that children are not the primary drivers of COVID-19 being spread in schools and in the community. The risk for children continues to be very low, and nationally they account for only 7% of positive cases and only a tenth of deaths associated with COVID-19. And those numbers of children who are dying from COVID-19 are fewer than each of the last 5 flu seasons. Now, our local context here in Bexar County show that those numbers are not consistent. We're seeing a higher percentage of positive cases in those under 18, and we're seeing a higher percentage of COVID-related deaths as it relates to the total number of COVID-related deaths in Bexar County. Nonetheless, I think we all know that the information that we've received has been pretty consistent that children are at less of a risk than us adults, and particularly those with pre-existing conditions, immunocompromised and advanced age. In addition, the risk mitigation guidelines are very clear, and they have and will continue to be strictly incorporated into our protocols and procedures, enforced and followed in the district. But what is more difficult to control, and this is something that I definitely want to impress upon all of us today, is that while we may be able to control our behaviors as it relates to protocols for safety and mitigating the risk here in our workplace, we cannot ensure that all of our employees, all of us that work and serve here outside of ECISD, are adhering to those same risk mitigation best practices, to include discretionary social gatherings larger than 10. And so I believe that that's a call to action for each and every one of us to make sure that we're not putting one another at risk because of the behaviors that we're choosing to exhibit outside of work that may not be consistent with the medical guidance that we're all aware of. In regards to public education, I want to just hover up and think about our role in society as educators and as a public education entity. We are funded jointly by the state of Texas through state tax revenue, oil and gas revenue, as well as a few other federal sources and others, about half. And the other half generally comes from local taxpayers, which many of us are in the East Central community. And even if we don't live in the East Central community, we know that we all pay school taxes in our respective school districts that we reside within. And so when folks pay taxes for something, they expect a return on that investment. And we also know that 75% of citizens across the East Central community and across the state of Texas have a hard time seeing a direct return on that investment because they either do not have school-age children or they no longer have school-age children. And so it's very difficult for those 75% to support us if we're not above board at all times and that we're not delivering high quality outcomes as a school district. In addition, those that have children that are school aged and those who may not but own businesses rely on people to be able to go to work and rely on being able to go to work. And while we are not a child care service, we are educators and we are an education entity. The economy cannot move if schools are not in session. And we all have experienced in our own lives, in our own social circles, in our own family circles, loss of employment, loss of income, and increased anxiety due to the fact that folks are unable to get out into the community, partake in products and services and purchase goods, which in turn means a lot less people are necessary in the workplace. And so, when we think about our role as public educators and how we are funded, you can see where much of the criticism comes from, particularly as it relates to us being super careful about reentry, to include our own reentry to the workplace at a time when folks aren't getting paid for not being at work, many, and at a time where folks don't have an option to stay home. And all of those things are currently conditions that we've been able to enjoy since the closure in March. And so I'm not being critical in any way. I'm just setting the context for us all to share the same point of view. Additionally, the families in our communities, their children benefit from wraparound supports. These children get counseling, social services. They are provided physical activities and daily nutrition, and the list goes on. When we're not open, those things aren't happening. We also know that there have always been inherent risks that come with being a public educator. We have all been exposed to children without vaccinations. We're always more susceptible during cold and flu seasons. If we've been in this long enough, we've experienced lockdowns and lockouts due to threats of various kinds, to include even bomb threats, damaged gas lines, downed power lines, threats of active shooters, even physical assaults from time to time, particularly if we're in roles serving children with emotional disturbances. Maybe we are bitten, maybe we're kicked or hit, but we always mitigate all of those risks. We use expert guidance and follow the latest research so we can develop policies and procedures and protocols to make sure that we can mitigate those risks, prevent the negative effects of those potential risks to the extent possible. But at the end of the day, they're the conditions within which we work as educators. And again, available evidence provides reason to believe that in-person schooling, and this is according to the report from the CDC yesterday, is in the best interest of students, particularly when appropriate mitigation measures are consistently implemented, as they have been in essential workplaces. We all know that HEB is an essential workplace, and that HEB has incorporated many mitigation measures, and they also adjusted their protocols for a time where you can only purchase so many goods of a certain kind. Folks in advanced age were only allowed to come in during a particular time, or were given a time where they could come in without any other customers there. They shortened their hours. They did a lot of things to regroup and make sure that their logistical protocols were adapted well and going to ensure that their patrons and employees were safe. But at the end of the day, they never closed, and we could not survive if they did for very long. And so as essential workplaces, the mitigation measures that we too are incorporating have proven to be very successful at reducing the risk of transmission and ultimately helping the entire community flatten and hopefully get that COVID diagnosis curve moving in the right direction. But another thing that I want us to think about as educators is that, kind of like soldiers who enlist in the military, once they sign up, and they know what they're getting into, they may spend an entire career never being deployed to a wartime situation, but they may be deployed several times. Nonetheless, they don't get to pick and choose the context. They have to trust that the military will mitigate the risk within that context, provide the appropriate training and support and resources. But ultimately, when you sign up to be a soldier, conditions could be extreme from time to time, and you stand up and stand in the gap and fulfill your role as obligated. And the same thing could be said for first responders. Could you imagine a fireman who says it's 100 degrees outside? I know that family's house is burning and there's a baby inside, but I don't fight fires after 100 degrees because, I have asthma. And so there just similarly are expectations of our families and ultimately our children that we mitigate the risk to the extent possible. And we step up and we stand in the gap to provide an education as well as all of the wraparound supports that our children in this community need. Again, their safety and ours is our number one priority. And the education and the wraparound supports of our children are number two. Now, what does a quality education mean as it relates to remote learning? All of the research, and I know you've all done your own research, is clear. All children learn best from face-to-face instruction. However, there are substantial benefits for most children, many children, when they have the opportunity to have a combination of face-to-face instruction coupled with remote flexibility, meaning that learning never stops and access to information and academic learning support anytime, any place really is the best case scenario. And I think in the context we're in, we're realizing something that we always knew, but never had the flexibility to deliver on, and maybe didn't have the capacity to deliver on, that if we can get to an environment where we have the flexibility to provide face-to-face instruction as well as remote flexible instruction and support for all kids, and then fluctuate the frequency and the duration of that given individual kids' needs, that we could be an even better school and school system and better teachers than we've ever been before. But the research is also very clear that remote learning, when prolonged and without any face-to-face contact, has detrimental effects on learning outcomes for every child. And as has been repeated multiple times, it is most detrimental for struggling students. In other words, children who are already struggling or disengaged academically prior to COVID-19, for our youngest learners who are not yet as able to manage their time and focus their attention without adult support and guidance. And even more so if they're young and academically struggling and also happen to have learning disabilities or other qualifying conditions for special services, or if they're English language learners. And then in all of those cases, as is the case with any child, if they come from poverty, remote exclusive instruction, schooling is detrimental at accelerated rates for those who have additional risk factors, as I previously mentioned. We also know that we learned in the spring that there are some connectivity challenges in our community. There are some dead spots in our community, fortunately not as many as there are across Bexar County and the greater San Antonio area. And we were able to mitigate quite a bit of those with hotspots. But more than that, there were many families in our community who did not have devices to connect. And if they had multiple children in their homes, they either didn't have the bandwidth for them all to be online at the same time, or not enough devices so that they didn't have to share and spread their access to instruction or learning throughout the entire day. So just the disparity across our community as it relates to opportunity to access instruction and learning due to all of the risk factors that I've already mentioned multiple times was accelerated in March, and will continue to be as we enter into the fall under an order that says we must provide remote only instruction through September 7th without any confidence that we're going to be allowed to return immediately after that. It's also important to know that, and I know you guys have read information about this, but 65% approximately in San Antonio, and is pretty consistent nationally, 65% of child protection services referrals, they come from us, because we spend a ton of time with these children and we know what to look for. And we oftentimes intervene and get these children the protection and the support that they need, regardless of the circumstances they find themselves in from their caregivers. But since March, when we were shut down, reports have dropped. I've seen reports as few as much as 47 to 50% fewer referrals to CPS, which means that students who are in very dangerous circumstances are likely incarcerated within those circumstances without anybody intervening. And as a consequence, just in the San Antonio Metro Health area, there has been more than a 20% increase in emergency room treatment that have been identified as abuse-related cases as compared to last year during this time. And similarly, I think that the latest numbers I've seen is between 18 and 22% increase in the number of domestic violence 911 calls to the county and the city. Again, because folks are in increased states of anxiety, financial stress is at an all-time high, and they're spending all day, every day. Oftentimes, families are together in households, which exacerbates any of the relational anxieties and stress that may have existed prior. So what is the current mandate? As I mentioned a minute ago, we're required to only open and offer remote instruction through September 7th. We're going to open August 17th and begin providing instruction remotely as our school calendar that was adopted by the board designates. So school will start August 17th. Children will not be provided face-to-face instruction, and we will be coming to work, and we will be mitigating all risk factors, and we will be prepared with all of our reentry and return to work protocols that we've developed since March. And teachers will be allowed, as they are by the order, to teach from their classrooms. We believe that that is where all of your resources are. We believe that that is where we could provide the support that you need, both technical support and pedagogical support, curriculum and instruction, resources and support. And that because remote synchronous and asynchronous instruction is new to all of us, this gives us a ramp-up period of time for us to ensure quality to the extent possible, knowing that no matter how good we are in this remote learning platform, it's never going to be as good as we are face-to-face. We also know that the order is clear about 10% occupancy. We know that while faculty are coming back to our buildings, that we cannot exceed 10% of the available capacity of each of those buildings, and we will adhere to that. It is mandated that all health safety guidelines are implemented, monitored, and enforced at all times, and they have been since March and will continue to be going forward. And again, for the third time, no matter how good we do, it is clear in the research that the children of the East Central ISD community will be underserved, and they will have long-term effects, ill effects, due to the inability of us to serve them in the manner that we do best, and in the inability for us to provide the wraparound supports that they all need. And as time continues to pass, that we are not allowed to connect with our kids, the obligations and the accountability that we have for their learning and for their progress is going to increasingly become insurmountable so long as reentry continues to be prolonged. Protocols are going to include that we all complete a screener the beginning of each week. So on Sunday, before we report, we're going to formally complete an online screener that is documented and ensures that we have answered for ourselves all of the questions associated with the symptoms that might indicate risk for COVID-19 or possible infection of COVID-19, as well as our travel activities and such. And the purpose of the screener is to ensure that we take the personal responsibility to not come to work in the event that we have to check yes to any of those items on the screener. The protocol is going to mean that if you have a yes, you notify your supervisor immediately and you notify personnel and you stay home. We'll attach a nurse to the case. The nurse is going to be in touch with you, and together we're going to figure out what your situation is. If in the event you can get with your primary care provider, Health ESU, we can connect with Metro Health and kind of explain what we're dealing with. And it is determined that you have symptoms not consistent with COVID and continued testing is not recommended, and that it's something else, and that you're safe to return to work, and we've documented that, and you can return to work within 24 hours, then you will not be docked, and you will not have to proceed with any of the leave options that you have available to you. And if in the event that we need to conduct further testing, and it is recommended by your healthcare provider that you get a COVID test, and that this may cause you to be out for more than a day, then personnel will work very closely with you to assist you with all of the options you have available for leave, both paid and unpaid. And I will get into the details of that in just a few minutes. But I want to be clear that initial stay at home is not going to be a dock situation, because we don't want to incentivize staff to take any potential symptoms lightly, and the same conditions will be expected for our students when they begin to re-enter, whenever that is. If you are COVID positive, or if someone is COVID positive among us, within that same 24-hour period that I mentioned a minute ago, there will be notification of confirmation. All medical directives will be implemented, again, in coordination with physicians and guidance from San Antonio Metro Health. And we've had significant practice with this up until this point. Any staff who may have been exposed, and keep in mind that the medical definition of exposure is very specific. It entails being within 6 feet of somebody who is COVID positive for a minimum of 15 consecutive minutes without any PPE or protection, then you could be exposed. If you drink after somebody who has been diagnosed with COVID positive, if you exchange, essentially kissing, exchange saliva or mucus with somebody who has been COVID positive, then you've been exposed. And those exposed will have some directive from the medical guidelines for quarantine and isolation, and a period of time and protocol that comes with that. So within 24 hours, medical directives implemented, staff exposed will be personally contacted and advised, and again, all medical directives implemented. And then the next ring, if you will, of contact, folks who are near the situation but not exposed will also be personally contacted. And in general, what we've been able to do at that point, if I use an example, let's say that the front office area at the high school, that an employee within that area had a positive diagnosis. We do the investigation. The nurse works on contact tracing, collaborates with San Antonio Metro Health. The employee positive is quarantining, receiving treatment. There was one other employee who may have been exposed. That person has been advised and is on their period of quarantine with medical support. But all other employees in the office area within 24 hours will be brought together, more than likely in a Google Meet format, and advised within HIPAA regulations of the situation that essentially we had a COVID positive among us. Those who have been exposed have been contacted and advised, and medical directives implemented. Those who were positive have been also directed and are following medical guidance. The rest of you, according to the guidance, are at minimal risk, and as long as we continue to follow all guidelines and directives, we can return to work. And so that will be the protocol, has been and will be. Timing is of the essence. The quicker that we find out about an incident and can communicate to everybody involved before we send messaging out to the entire faculty or to the community, relieves everybody's anxiety and make sure that we're fully transparent, that everybody's aware of their risk levels and are advised appropriately given those risks. So as I mentioned before, all staff will report as scheduled. All directives and health guidelines will be followed. We're in the process of ensuring that sign out will be paperless. So by the time we re-enter, staff should not have to go to the front office to sign in or sign out. We want to reduce touch points, and we want to reduce the need to congregate for any particular reason. Professional development as you return will be on site, and to the extent possible will be virtual through Google Meet. There will be some need for some of that training to be more blended, and in some cases face-to-face, which in those cases will be in small groups with appropriate distancing and safety protocols in place. And again, all in the interest of giving you all of the support and the training that you need and the resources that you need to stand up your remote learning environments, and all while remaining safe. At this time, working remotely is not an option. And we know that what that creates is substantial difficulty for those of you who have school-age children who go to school in our district or in any school district in the area that is in the county and currently closed. For that reason, we made a request along with several districts in the county for consideration from the city of San Antonio. And we received some relief, although not the degree of relief we were looking for, but we did receive approval for those who are essential for delivering instruction, which none are more essential for delivering instruction than our teachers, of elementary aged school children. And as it goes right now, we're talking about kinder through fifth grade. We're in the process of working on pre-K and employee pre-K, but as it stands right now, we don't have the latitude to bring those children into school and without being a certified healthcare provider. But we're working on that. So as of today, teachers who have no ability to provide childcare are going to be allowed to bring their children with them. The requirements of the order, however, are that they cannot be with you in the classroom. Children are going to have to be put into small groups where they're a minimum of 8 feet apart with PPE and all guidelines followed. And they cannot receive direct instruction or any other services. So this is not childcare. It does not rise to the level of quality childcare, nor does it rise to the level of quality education. But it essentially will be a place for them to receive their remote instruction, whether from ECISD educators or from their teacher in another district in the county. We will coordinate with you all who have children in the buildings for them to be supervised. Lunches will be provided curbside to the community, and they would have access to curbside lunches like any other student in the community. But understand that this situation is a relief for many of you, but it is limited to those that are essential for instruction. So here's how it works. Let's just say, for example, that the actual occupancy at Pecan Valley is 1,000, which is a little bit different than the enrollment capacity. And so assuming that we find confirmation that it's 1,000, 10% of that would be 100. And let's say that there are 67 employees at Pecan Valley. By order, that leaves space for 33 additional people in that building. So starting from teachers, We could look at the number of school-age children that teachers intend to bring to campus with them because they don't have childcare. And if there are still remaining seats, if you will, available, then we move inside the classroom and gradually work out. So that might mean instructional aides or paraprofessionals. And if there's additional room, then that could mean moving out to other support staff on the campus. But it has to be in the order of inside the classroom with the teacher and work its way out. And so that is not fair. That is not equal, and it is not ideal. But as I said early in the conversation, this is the best among imperfect options that we have available to us. I also want to reassure you that there is nothing that we have done in the district since March and that we will continue to do in the district going forward is going to put me personally at risk, you personally at risk, my family at risk or your family at risk, my child who is a student in the school district at risk, or your children at risk, or my own 2-month-old grandchild at risk. We all have additional risk factors that this epidemic exposes us all to. Without any details, I can tell you that I have an immunocompromised daughter and an immunocompromised wife and a 2-month-old grandbaby. And nothing up to this point has given me distress that we have been doing, and nothing that we will accept in our safety protocols going forward will rise to the level of putting my own child or family at risk. And I only say that in hopes of earning your trust that I would ensure that the same safety measures apply for you and for your families and your children. So at this point, you might be asking, what are my options? Well, the first option that we all have is to return to work as we are contracted or scheduled to do so. That's one option. And I know that the majority of you fully intend to do that. That the majority of you were confident, but hoping to be reassured that our plans were going to be tight, that they were going to be considerate, that they were going to be conservative, and that they were going to be well implemented as we ramp up from employees to someday gradually introducing students into our school system, given first the medical guidance in the current context of COVID-19 in the city of San Antonio. Another option, if you have a qualifying condition, is to consider FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. With any qualifying condition, all of us have access to up to 12 weeks of either consistent or intermittent leave. But if we go out on FMLA, you have to use your own leave. So if you have 2 weeks worth of leave, but you're out for 12, you'll get paid for 2 weeks, but not the other 10. And that's not a new benefit that we've all had available. But what is a new benefit that is specifically related to COVID-19 is a temporary benefit that is available through December at this particular time, and it kind of falls under the FMLA umbrella, and it's called the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA. And if you have a qualifying condition, and I won't go into the fine details, but I'm going to give you a high-level overview. If you have a positive diagnosis, for example, you stayed home that day because you were concerned. We find out that, and you find out that it's a test required and that you're COVID positive. We'll be working with you on getting this paperwork submitted for approval, and you could qualify for up to 10 work days of full pay, and this is without taking your leave. That's 10 work days, which means whatever weekends fall within that are additional days. And the federal government believes that that will give most of us the opportunity to complete all of the required quarantine days and get the treatment that we need for safe reentry to work. Now, we can all qualify for that if we meet the qualifying condition. And if we take those 2 weeks, that's 2 of the FMLA 12 that were allocated in a given year. As of June 1st, we all have those days reset. So if you've taken FMLA prior, beginning Is it July 1st? It might be July. Somebody correct me here in the chat, but I believe it's July 1st. Now, after that 10 days, July 1st? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So as of July 1st, we all have 12 weeks for the work year, fiscal year. If we have an issue with childcare, meaning that our childcare centers are closed, or if our schools are closed and I have school-age children, which all of our employees across the district, outside of teachers in the classroom going forward, beginning August 17th, will have an issue with school being closed in East Central ISD and across the county. If they're unable to secure childcare under these conditions, not because I have COVID or someone in the family has COVID, but for childcare related issues that are COVID related only, you could qualify for an extended emergency family medical leave, which is an additional 10 weeks of leave for which you will not be required to use your own personal leave. The caveat, however, is that you will only receive two-thirds of your pay. And I say you, I mean, it's all of us. This is the temporary benefit that we all have available during the pandemic. And again, anytime you call and notify your supervisor and personnel that you are concerned about your health, given some symptoms that or given that you feel like you may have been exposed to someone who you now found out is COVID positive, that immediately when that process begins, we will begin advising you about all of the details of these benefits and give you the full suite of options available to you and support you in advocating for those benefits. And your last option is to choose to abandon your contract or your position. And in those particular cases, I've definitely seen much information circulating, which I cannot confirm, that suggests that in a condition of a pandemic like we're in now, that if you were to abandon your contract, although you had no other qualifying conditions for not returning to work, but still feel that it is unsafe for you and therefore you choose to abandon your contract, that you could potentially qualify for unemployment. Now, again, I cannot confirm that, but I've seen some education groups that support all of us sharing that possibility or guidance from legal counsel. So what I would say is that it's an option available to you. Whether you qualify for unemployment or not is uncertain, but it is also something to consider if you find yourself in that situation. But just know that I can't confirm that you would qualify for unemployment. And I think that everybody on this call knows that unemployment also comes with it a reduction in the financial benefits that you receive, along with some other constraints. So lastly, before we get into our remote learning plan, as we've been under construction since March, that I feel is going to help clear up many of the questions around how is this going to affect me in terms of my workload, my work day, my work week? Am I going to have to do 2 different lesson plans, one for remote and one for in-person when we get to an in-person environment? And what about supporting remote synchronous learners at the same time supporting asynchronous learners? Like, I can't see a path forward. I've got a lot of anxiety around that. And believe me, I did too for a very long time and still have some. But I believe that we have worked together with curriculum instruction and leaders across the district, as well as many teachers from across the district, to stand up what we believe is something that mitigates the majority of those concerns. And over time, we'll continue to do so. And we're going to give you a preview of that here in just a moment. But I'll leave you with this before we move on and then close with some Q&A. And that is that with all that I've said about, how professional we have all been, how our character has been revealed during these very tenuous times, and also around what our obligation is to children as educators, to the East Central community and the broader community as education entities. That with all that being said, I am most proud of the way that you guys have shown up on social media, that the vast majority of you continue to be positive and encouraging, ask very thoughtful questions, and put very thoughtful opinions and points of view out there in the world. But I can't say the same for many of our colleagues um, across the city, in the state, in the nation. And what I want to encourage all of you to do is, number one, to the extent possible, stay above board, as difficult as it may be to take the shots across the bow from the folks who are overly confident and inappropriate on the other side of a screen or on the other side of a social media platform. To withhold emotion and to stay professional and calm and logical. And that to the extent that some of our colleagues have a bad moment, which we're human and all may do so, step in the gap, coach them up, encourage them, hold them accountable, because for every one of us that crosses the line and shows a moment of weakness where we're not our best selves and professional, it reflects poorly on all of us. And so it requires all of us to support and hold one another accountable, to make sure that we're showing up in the world in the way that we would prefer to do so, particularly under adverse conditions. But lastly, and this is not a threat, please don't take it that way, but the small percentage of folks who are public educators in and outside of our district who are on the wrong side of this kind of conduct, please look at the Educator Code of Ethics. Please study board policy as it relates to the conduct becoming of a professional educator in East Central ISD, and ensure that you're not crossing the line in those areas, because the worst part of mine or any leader's job or supervisor's job is to have to hold people accountable for having a bad moment or for not being their best selves. And going forward, people are circling the wagons, looking for those opportunities to take that information, send it to your supervisor, send it to the media, send it to school boards, send it to superintendents in an attempt to say, these people in public education are part of the problem. They are not part of the solution. And they think that they are entitled to things that the rest of us in the world who are also living with a pandemic are not. And that is not the way we feel. And that is not who we are. And again, I applaud all of you in the East Central Independent School District who have been so professional and above board and who continue to do so. And I'm humbled by that and thankful for that. And because of that, I know that we're going to come out the other side of this thing eventually better than we were going into it. So with that being said, Shannon, Dr. Fuller, if you could step into the conversation and provide our staff with a nice little overview of the work we've been doing around remote learning modalities.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Toscano. First, I just want to say that I think that we can all agree that we have the most amazing superintendent. I have had lots of opportunity over the last month to talk and work with other districts, and I'm just very proud that he's so transparent, so willing to listen and communicate with all of us. So thank you for that. I am sharing with you today some first drafts of work that we've been doing over the last couple weeks. Many of your colleagues have come in to engage with us in curriculum writing to help prepare for your return, so that when you come to plan and enter back into school, you have some great tools for you to work on to help stand up your remote learning for your students. So the first thing that I wanted to share, and many of you have asked about, is what might my daily schedule look like? So we have, Mr. Oliver is going to help me and share some sample schedules so that we can look at them. And Mr. Oliver, if you will go to the first remote only schedule, I think it's on page 2. So what we're going to share with you is hot off the press. It's something that we shared with your administrators just yesterday to get their feedback. So it's very much in draft form. It is not, it is a sample schedule, and your administrators will be working to help craft them to meet your campus specific needs. So I think, is it showing? I can't see that it's there, but what we've talked about is this is going to be a remote only. So when we're the first 3 weeks, when we're in remote only schedule, which means you'll be in your classroom teaching, students will be either engaging through remote learning synchronously, where it'll be live face-to-face where they'll log on, or asynchronously where they'll be working on their own time. And so this first sample schedule is a K through 2. And what I want you to notice is what we've tried to do to the best extent possible is to share and color code it so that you can see kind of blocks of time, if you will. So in the green times is where you would be live streaming a lesson. So students would have an opportunity to jump on with you and be live time just like this, chat box, and you'd be able to have some, give your direct lesson and have some back and forth. The blue blocks of time where it would be, you'd be in your classroom, you would be working not necessarily live all the time. You could be working live with small groups of children. So you might have like 4 kids stay back with you. You could do a lesson with them, a guided reading. You could do a small group or an intervention or something like that. Or you might also be working asynchronously and providing support through your Google Classroom, either through feedback, grading, or checking to see what students are doing. So you can kind of see that what we've done is spread out those blocks of synchronous time throughout the day for students to log on, and then those blocks of blue time where you could schedule something again synchronously or support that asynchronous learning. So that's a sample K through 2. Now, what you'll also notice is that if you've read the guidelines from TEA, they've given us some specific time requirements. K through 2 does not have any synchronous time requirements. They only are required for attendance to be asynchronously. But as teachers, we know that students need to be able to see us. We need to build that sense of community. We need to give that direct instruction and that opportunity. So students K through 2 will have an opportunity to log on synchronously for instruction. All right, if you keep going down, but there is no minute requirement for K through 2. So if you go down to the 3 through 5 remote, which is skip this one and go down to the next one. I have lots of drafts of lots of possibilities, whether we're face-to-face. So I'm showing you the remote only, which would apply for the first 3 weeks right now. This is 3 through 5. They have a 180-minute requirement for synchronous instruction daily. And so with those, we still have the green and the blue, I mean the same exact thing. It does not in this one equal exactly 180 for the green, and that's because through the blue, you'll be pulling students to continue to meet throughout the day. So what we thought is you would give the green direct instruction, but we know that most of our students have individual needs, or we'll be working with them again in small group through guided reading lessons, guided math lessons, MTSS support. And so you'll be pulling those kids and deciding what their individual times will be to meet with you. And so they will ultimately add up to around 180 minutes, but that's kind of what a sample 3 through 5 lesson looks like. So in both of these examples for pre-K through 5, you can see that as a teacher, you'll have specific times during the day where students will log on with you, and then you'll have specific times through the day where you'll be able to support asynchronous instruction and or pull students synchronously throughout the day. So hopefully that kind of gives you a better picture of what that might look like. It also allows students an opportunity to minimize their screen time. And so as a student, we know that many of them, their attention span hopefully it's developmentally appropriate for the time that they'll be spending online. And then they'll be able to get off that asynchronous instruction and go do a lesson or go do their independent practice, go do some work and then hop back on with you. So it'll give them some time to go back and forth and minimize some of that screen time. All right, so if we'll jump down to middle school, and it should be right after this one. So keep going down. Should be a blue and a yellow, I think, as well, or blue and green. There we go. Oh, it's high school. High school's next. I'm out of order. So high school, this is the high school sample schedule. And what it does is high school and middle school have a requirement of 240 minutes synchronously per day. And so in order to do that, what we talked about with the administrators is breaking it up into an A and B day, if you will. And so this is the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they would have first period, second period, third period, and fourth period, where they would hop on synchronously, and those times are depicted in the yellow color. In the blue color, the beginning and the end of the day, you have some times where you can support asynchronous instruction as well. So these times can be where you're supporting asynchronous. It can be office hours where students can sign up to come meet with you who are working asynchronous only, and you can ask questions, get some specific feedback. It can also be additional PLC or planning time that you might have. Tutoring, if students need tutoring or extra support, you can provide it during this time. And then we know that some of our students for CTE have specific seat time and or extended time instructional requirements. And so we can use this time to help them meet those specific requirements. So let's say, for example, I am teaching and my third period is my conference period. It will continue to be your conference tier period. So third period you would be off. And then if you, depending on when your conference time falls and how much, you might get additional conference time during that asynchronous hours before or after the synchronous periods. And then you have your Tuesday, Thursday schedule, which would be 5th, 6th, and 7th period. And so you will see that the 5th and 6th and 7th period on Tuesdays and Thursdays are a little bit longer to allow for equal time between all periods throughout the week. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the high school schedule it would potentially look like. The high school staff is currently working on this and tweaking on it to make sure that it meets their specific needs as far as time frame. But if you, hopefully, if our math was correct and it does equal the hours that it would need or the minutes requirements for students to be on synchronous instruction. And then the last one should be middle school. And here we go, this is middle school. Now, middle school is a little bit different because they have 8 periods instead of 7 periods. And so we've played with this quite a bit. It's still very much in draft form, but we had a little bit of time, a little bit of difficulty. High school fit pretty nicely because it was a 7-period day, doing it with Tuesday, Thursday, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So what we have for middle school is a Monday, Wednesday schedule, a Tuesday, Thursday schedule, and then a Friday schedule. So it's not the most ideal, but it's the best that we could do to try and provide some consistency for students. So on Monday and Wednesday, they have periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then for synchronous instruction in the yellow, asynchronous time again before and after for teachers to support asynchronous instruction, office hours, tutoring, anything like that. And then on Tuesday and Thursday would be periods 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then on Friday, what we came up with, which we feel was the best option, was that it would be a full day schedule for the student. They would have every single period for only 30 minutes at a time. That way we have the 240 minutes for each student, and there's equitable access for every period and content area for the students for the week. So that kind of gives you a nice overview of what our best thinking is right now for that first 3 weeks coming back. Hopefully you will see as a teacher that there's times dedicated for synchronous, there's times dedicated for asynchronous support, still having conference periods, as well as providing students the extra support they might need through tutoring or your planning or anything, small group instruction and that kind of thing. So that's where we are right now with scheduling. The next thing I wanted to share with you is around curriculum and instruction support. So we, as I shared, do have curriculum writers currently working with us across the district. There are teachers from every single grade level and every single campus who came in to receive training, I guess at the beginning of maybe the week before last. My time's running together, but and they're now working to create that. So our goal is to, for the extent possible, for all the core classes, pre-K through 8, to have a video bank for you where your teachers and colleagues are currently creating those videos so that you can provide live synchronous instruction. But for those asynchronous students that cannot, that you have a video bank that you could go and pick some videos to upload for them to watch in your Google Classroom. The other option that you have is that you can record yourself through your synchronous instruction or your colleagues, and you can also then take that recording and upload it for students to watch for asynchronous learning during their asynchronous times. So there's a couple options that we're going to walk you through, not necessarily today with that, but we are working on creating professional development and helping you make those decisions that would work best for your students and your classroom. But for the thing that I want to give you just right now is just a glimpse of how that will all be organized. And so Mr. Oliver is going to click on the link that says an elementary sample. So in our Google Classrooms, what we are going to set up is slide decks. And these slide decks will be used for their daily instruction. You can use them for synchronous and asynchronous remote learning. They will also serve as your lesson plans. So as you create these, they will serve as your lesson plan for the day. So you will not have to do a lesson plan and a slide deck daily. You'll just have your slide deck. So what we've done is just create a sample for you to look at here for 3rd grade, Miss Key's class. And what it will take you through is, as Mr. Oliver just goes through, it'll give you kind of a sample of what will a student experience. So when they go into their Google Classroom, they'll click on their slide deck per day, and it will take them through their entire day. So it'll tell them ELAR, what are they going to be learning today, the materials that they might need. It'll give them when their live instruction will be broadcast for the day, and then what we'll be looking for evidence of learning. And then at the top right, you can see that there's a little video that's embedded there. You don't have to play that, but that if there's anything that might just be a morning message or something for them that they can click on, that's there for a resource as well. Let's go for the next slide. So then you'll see all the ELAR slides for that day. So their mini lesson, in there we would embed either a link where they would click on to join you synchronously, or an uploaded lesson or a recording of the lesson that you did that day for them to watch for asynchronous. Any anchor charts that they might use that you might refer to during your mini lesson, and then the practice that they'll do during that practice time that's outlined on the schedule. So when they get off the synchronous lesson, what will they be doing before they join you again for your next direct instruction? And then there's just another example of some independent work. The nice thing about this independent work, and this is something that we'll work with you on to show you how to do this, but students can answer the things that you set up for them directly into the slide if you'd like them to. So for this, you can see that there are text boxes that are right there. If for this inventory that we're asking students to do you like to read? The student could go right in that blue box and click, yes, it's my favorite thing to do every single day. And that will be recorded in their Google Classroom. It'll be right there for you. They won't have to click and go anywhere else. So that's a nice feature that we've also been working on to try and make the ease of use for students and parents as they're continuing their work through the day. Then if you go on to writing, very similar. You have your mini lesson, anchor chart and practice. Grammar, same thing. You can see there's like already a lesson embedded there that we could click on, but we're not going to do that today. But and then you can see where they can access their practice. Phonics is there for them as well. And then there's some word work for them where they take the word list and they would, there's an independent practice for them to do their, right in the slide deck for them. Then PE, so then it's their specials time. So again, they could join live to their PE with their PE teacher in the gym, or if they missed it asynchronously, we'll have the links down below where a student could get on and watch the video. Part of our Curriculum writing is having our specialist teachers. They are currently also creating videos for students to be able to, for you to upload in the slide decks for them to be able to access for asynchronous learning. Then math. What we've tried to do also is create different structures and colors. So you see English follows a very similar pattern. So students will know they're still in English. When it turns to math, when it's math time, it turns to a different color and the layout's a little bit different. So here's your math time, says the time it is, goes to the different components on this form, on this slide, excuse me, gives you a problem of the day that they can work on. There's their video that they can watch. If you click there on these, I believe it'll take you to some independent practice. Yep, it'll tell you what they can do. Sorry, there's the little screen that's below, but yes. So a student can click on it and the pencil would take them to their assignment and the computer would take them to some online practice. It's lunchtime. Go eat a healthy, nutritious lunch. And then we get into social studies. So social studies and science, we know they are going to be formatted the same because in our year to glances, they trade off times. And so I won't take you all through all of this, but it just kind of, it'll take you through the social studies lesson. So that kind of, if you will, gives you an overview of what a slide deck would be. Our goal for curriculum instruction is to create the structure. You'll have a template for your slide deck. So you won't have to create your slide deck from scratch. You'll have the template. You'll just download your template and you'll upload your content into it, just like you would your lesson plan. Again, you could use, you'll input your links for your Google Hangout or your Google Meet, excuse me, or use a video from the bank that we're creating for asynchronous students. So that gives you kind of an idea of what elementary looks like. We have a secondary example I'm taking you through really, really quickly. It's a second link, Mr. Oliver, on the page. One of our very wonderful teachers, we borrowed hers, who's been working on curriculum writing for us. So Sabrina White, if you're on the call, this is going to look really familiar to you. Here we go. So this is a middle school example. So the middle schools have been engaging in Raise Up Texas, and so they use the unit organizers as a way to organize their instruction. So each of your slide decks will start with a unit organizer. And the interesting thing about this is that a student would just use this as their frame. On the left-hand side, you can see that it has day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And so that's where students would click to go to their daily slide deck. So Mr. Oliver, if you'll click on day 2, please, where it says, yep, right there. There you go. Uh-oh. So once they click on the day, it will take them into their daily slide deck, just like you saw, here we go, for elementary. So here's their unit organizer again, specifically focusing on their day. They'll tell them, you know, it's kind of their introduction. So if you'll go to slide 2. Fun thing that Sabrina did was she used her Bitmoji and she went in and customized her slide deck. So you are more than welcome to do that. It is certainly not a requirement. You can use a template, or you can make it your own and have it be fun. It's completely up to you. So she has a super cute little today's announcements where she'd put on the back whatever students that she needed students to know. Then go to second slide. Then she gets into her lesson. She talks about the agenda for her time together, because this is by periods now, what the learning target will be, so students know what to expect. She has a little success starter, so her little to get started for the day. There's her, she has a little anchor chart, if you will, to explain the distributive property. And then she has her instructional video. Her instructional video, she uses like a whiteboard format so students can see, and you can see that her picture of her is over on the left-hand side. Hers has been pre-recorded, so you can do that. You can use a pre-recorded video, or you can go live, whatever is most convenient and helpful for you. If you use a pre-recorded video, you're going to want to make sure that during that synchronous time, you are live with students so that students are able to interact, you're able to see their comments, much like we're doing here, to have that back and forth two-way communication. Then there's some examples for students to work on during their independent work. And some video support where she goes through and then shows her work and works works out the self-check for the students so that they can see how they did. Then she went into expanded UO to help them fill out their what they learned for the day. And there you go. So that kind of just gives you an idea of what it could possibly look like. So our goal is by the time that you return, you will have resources for you to access, whether it be a template for your slide deck that you can customize and or use just the one that we provide, and then a bank of videos. Now, our goal is to have this done K through 8 for all classes, and then your instructional facilitators in secondary have been working with us this week through next week to help to create supports in professional development. They'll be training you at secondary how to, where you find videos if they're made for your content, and how you're going to go ahead as a department to create your slide decks. We're not able to create videos for every single course that we offer in East Central ISD. We wish we could. We just aren't unable to, at this time, create that kind of volume. So what we are planning on doing is talking to you about some strategies that you can use if you do not have a video, or maybe you choose not to use the video that's available. You can always create, to tape yourself or video record what you're doing, and you can use that video the next day in your asynchronous too. So we're going to talk to you about lots of possibilities and tips and tricks as you come back to help ease your mind and get us used to this remote learning atmosphere that we're going to be in for teaching and learning. So I think those are the bulk things that I really wanted to share with you, just to kind of give you an idea. We have on the East Central ISD toolkit in our underneath in our sites, we have created a new tab called Remote Learning. It replaced the school closure tab, so the school closure tab is no longer there, but we've uploaded it and archived that and uploaded a new one called Remote Learning. Everything that we're going to create for you will eventually be housed in that tab when you return. So all of our PD, all of our slide decks, all of our videos that'll be available, once they're all complete, will be housed there for you to access. So if you have any questions, feel free, each of your campus administrators, academic facilitators have all been engaged in this work. We've given them an update. Please feel free to contact them. You can also reach out to us in the curriculum instruction department. As we're working through this, we are thinking about ease of use for you, what you would need to be successful. If you have any tips and tricks or anything that you'd like us to consider, please feel free to let us know. And we look forward to you coming back and getting into this new venture of remote learning. Anything else you want me to share, Mr. Toscano? Did I leave anything out?
No, Dr. Fuller, thank you for that. And I want to thank you and the curriculum instruction team, as well as all the teachers and instructional leaders from around the district who have worked so hard since March for sure, but even harder in standing up an instructional model that is going to push instruction and incorporate new learning, which we were unable to do in the spring. So it's an evolution of what we did in the spring. It was a tremendous lift to pull off what we did in the spring. I know that teachers across the district reported quite consistently that they appreciated it and that it was very useful. And I hope that what teachers saw today was that we've evolved that work and that we are truly mitigating the challenges that they're going to face with this new mode of instruction, both synchronously and asynchronously. And so for all of the curriculum instruction folks and all the folks that had a hand in will have a hand in getting us ready for August 17th, thank you so much. It really demonstrates the extraordinary commitment and talent that we have in East Central ISD as it relates to curriculum and instruction and leadership in those areas. So Dr. Fuller and your team, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
It
I
has.
will say, just one last thing is that it's not going to be perfect. As we're learning through and as we execute anything that's brand new, it's going to be something that's going to have some trial and error to it. And so we will rely on you teachers to help us, to give us feedback, to let us know when things work well and things don't work very well, so we can help to pivot and maneuver so that we can continue to meet our students' needs. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you guys soon.
So we've been on quite a while today, and my initial presentation and Dr. Fuller's today was intended to answer all of the questions that we had received thus far. There have been a couple that maybe we didn't touch on that I'd like to touch on. And then if there are a few questions that we can answer today, we will. But before we do that, I want to say that I want to remind you that your principals and campus leadership and I worked very closely together the last 2 days regarding each and every one of these details. There'll be a great source for you to get clarity around some of the things that you heard today. But in addition, keep those lines of communication open with them as other concerns rise, as other possibilities that you would like considered come to mind. Share those with your principal and with your instructional leadership team, and we'll curate those, research those, come up with possible solutions, and even incorporate many of those, on an hourly or daily basis. And again, we'll update you weekly from here on out, and have these conversations so that we can feel confident that we've got good plans, that we're all in this together, that your voice and perspectives matter, and again, that we can do the things that we're obligated to do for the children of the East Central community and their families. So 2 questions that I think I want to expand on that I don't think we touched on yet. Faith Moore had a really, really good question that I hadn't thought a whole lot about, and it was regarding the recording of synchronous instruction as it relates to privacy for staff and students. And so I've noted that. We're going to spend a little more time around that. My initial reaction to that, Faith, is that your Google Classrooms are accessible only to your students and the parents that you've invited to that. And all of those folks have an educational interest. And so therefore they all have a right to the information that you would be sharing through Google Classroom. But that is a fantastic question, and we need to think through some of those details and collaborate a little bit more broadly. So thank you, Faith, for bringing that to my and our attention. In addition to that, staff from Tradition Elementary, which I know all of you had us share the question regarding cleaning supplies, PPEs, and all of those sorts of things. We do have face guards. We do have PPEs, disposable as well as reusable for all staff and all students. We have, since you left, put hand sanitizer dispensers at every classroom, every hallway, every restroom, every office, in every building, and those will be filled routinely at all times. And we also have purchased e-mist disinfection units for every single campus across the district. And so those will be used daily and oftentimes multiple times daily. You'll be provided hand sanitizer. You'll be provided disinfection materials so that you, as part of the team in implementing our disinfection procedures, will have what you need provided by the district to wipe down high touch points, tabletops, supplies that may have to be shared between students. And again, all of these are that I'm talking about are for when students reenter, but you'll have available to you even prior to that. And we are looking at providing additional staff to campuses that would be completely mobilized with one purpose, and that is to go around constantly wiping down doorknobs, high touch points, copiers and copy rooms, areas and break rooms, everywhere where people are going to be, wiping them down and disinfecting them prior to you and us being there, and immediately upon us vacating the area. So those protocols and procedures and additional staff have been deployed. and have been in practice, and you could expect to see that in full force when you begin to return for professional development in anticipation of startup August 17th. So Tradition, thank you for that question on behalf of us all. And we do continue to research other options, other technologies, UV light systems for lab equipment and hands-on kinds of equipment that we could quickly use to disinfect. In addition to the traditional ways we would do that, we're exploring UV light and other technologies in HVAC systems, although we're very fortunate here that virtually all of our HVAC systems have been updated due to the 2016 bond program. And so we have upgraded filtration systems and efficiently and safely operating units up to current standards for air quality. But we're evaluating those and taking advantage of the opportunities we have to advance air quality in that regard. The other question Tradition had, I think I may have answered earlier, but in case I didn't, the question was, am I going to share information in a platform other than Facebook? And the answer to that is absolutely. I think that the modes of communication that we've traditionally used via social media, letters sent through social media, communicating intra-district through mail, trainer of trainers or cascading messages through leadership and then through the organization, employees all across the organization. We'll use all of those platforms. What I've learned in the world that we're living in today is that a live conversation like this, accessible and open to everybody, seems to be the most well received and the most broadly participated in. So this, in addition to our traditional modes of communication, I think are going to give us the best opportunity to connect. And as we all get the most updated information, we all are part of the chain of communication. And so we all have an obligation to share with our colleagues, to share with our parents and families and our neighbors the information that is the most accurate, most up to date. And of course, as you receive feedback in the community, as you receive feedback from your colleagues on campuses, again, distribute those immediately to your principals and leadership so that we can get it in the queue and add that to our database so that we can make the best decisions we can and make the best adjustments going forward all along the way. So with that, Mr. Oliver, unless there's some other additional questions that we need to answer at this time, our intention next week is to really start focusing on the more technical aspects of returning to work, the more technical aspects of procedures and protocols for safety, the more technical aspects of planning for instruction and professional development, so on and so forth. So, any questions pertaining to those things, that information's to come and be more focused on in our next conversation. And between now and then, you'll be getting a lot more of that information from your instructional leadership team.
So there were some comments. There was a lot of comments. We topped out at 510 viewers today, which is fantastic, and a lot of comments, but a lot of them were very early, so they got bumped. But if you have some questions, we can answer them right now. If you have some time, Mr. Toscano, if they comment right now versus me trying to go back and sort through and trying to find them. So let's see. Alex Decker says, will campus infection info be shared?
I'm going to assume the question that's being asked is one that I addressed earlier regarding our protocol for infection or COVID positive. So I'll review it. It is very important. And that is that in the event we have a COVID positive early on as it relates to employees, but even down the road as it relates to potentially employees and students, that the protocol is once we are made aware of a potential exposure or a potential infection, we immediately notify our supervisor. We notify HR if it's an employee. If it's a student, it'll be the principal or an administrator, and we notify the parents immediately. In both cases, we connect one of our nurses to the case. The nurse conducts contact tracing, interviews, and investigation, and determines preliminarily what we're dealing with, reaches out to Metro Health, who will then give us direction, and we'll follow that direction explicitly. Our goal is that within 24 hours, we'd get to the bottom of the situation. We would again notify the infected or the exposed about the medical guidance that they need to follow and what that means for them in terms of the treatment plan and the timelines. We would also inform personally any others exposed who meet the definition of exposure per health guidance, and we will give them guidelines from Metro Health and their health providers for their treatment, as well as their timelines for quarantine, et cetera, and what it will require from them to return. And then additionally, anybody that is in the area, say that building, that classroom, they're going to hear from us as well, personally, but more in a Google Meet format, to explain the situation. Of course, this would be HIPAA protected information. So we wouldn't say, hey guys, I know your teacher's Mr. Toscano, he's got COVID-19. But we would say that, in your classroom, we've had an exposure to, or we've had a confirmation of, and therefore all those folks who were positive, or all those folks who have been exposed, we have been advised. They've also followed medical guidance, and that plan has been executed. As it relates to you, you've been in the environment, but you've not been exposed. Rest assured that Metro Health is aware of your level of involvement, and their guidance for you is to continue wearing PPE, follow guidelines for disinfection and such, and just self-monitor. And as long as nothing changes, you're fine. And then we'll follow with more broad correspondence, to whether that means a faculty email, or even rising to the level of a full community and district-wide correspondence. So we started Epicenter, personalize it all the way through hours, close the loop, and then make sure that we're fully transparent, communicate as broad as we need to for the circumstance.
All right, Yvette Escobar asks, what about water fountains for children when they do come back? How will that be addressed?
Yeah. Ashley, if you're still on the call, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Good afternoon. So water fountains, what we're going to do is we will have a hand sanitizer right there by the water fountain. Kids will be asked to use it before and after drinking from the water fountain. We will have, they'll have to be socially distanced when they're waiting in line for the water fountain. There'll have to be an adult telling them not to put their mouth on the water fountain. And we will have wipes there for them to be able to wipe down the handle of the water fountain and the mouth piece of the water fountain. However, what we really want kids to do is we really want them to bring a water bottle to school. So they'll be able to have that in their backpack, and all students will be encouraged to bring a water bottle for them to use, so that they don't need to use water fountains.
Okay.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm going to combine two questions kind of into one. I'm going to show one and the other because they're kind of similar. Mr. Toscano, it says, will personal appliances be allowed in our classrooms this year to limit touch points? Examples, fridge and microwave. And then can we discuss break room protocol as well as shared microwaves?
Yeah, thanks to both of you for those questions. Those are great ones. And again, Ashley, it's right in your wheelhouse with regard to safety protocols.
Right. So the early guidance was that we were to shut down break rooms, and microwaves and refrigerators were not to be allowed. We're going to have to talk through that a little bit more. There may be the possibility of having, someone wipe those down before and after different people use them. There may be a possibility, if we talk to our energy management group, that maybe we could have, some things in the classroom. I don't know what direction we want to go on that, but as it stands, what the guidance is and what we have currently in our protocols is that we're to close down our teacher lunch rooms and break rooms, and that we're not to have multi-use, shared microwaves or refrigerators. So we're going to have to work through that. My best advice would be to bring with you your little ice chest with your lunch in it every day. You know, and again, we can work through that with administrators. We'll continue to talk about options for y'all on the campuses.
And I'll just add to that, as I mentioned before, we have plans to deploy some additional staff whose sole purpose is to kind of follow staff around and make sure that the areas that they frequent most, that we're wiping those things down in between visits from staff, and ensuring, in addition to what we're doing together and through custodial services, that we got some additional hands on deck to constantly disinfect things that we will be sharing, like copy machines, etc.
Okay. This next one it's kind of a two-parter from Christine. When creating class schedules, is it possible to not have the same schedule for all grade levels? This will help when planning for therapy times, especially when most of us have over 60 students to service, and some of us have more than one campus to service.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. We'll note that and double check, but I think that what we presented today as draft schedules show that elementary, middle, and high all have slightly different schedules. So maybe that solves that problem or mitigates some of the challenges associated with that to a degree. And of course, if there's some opportunities to still do some adjusting, we can certainly consider that.
Here's another interesting one. I have almost year-round allergies with chronic cough. Since that is a symptom, will I have to report it every week and have to wait for a nurse to clear me?
Misty, you and I are probably kindred spirits there. And so what I did early on was confirm through my physician that it was what I traditionally have ongoing, and provided that for personnel. And so long as the symptoms weren't different than that, I'm a go. I'm good to go. And I think that will be the same circumstance for you, Misty. But if anything were to change, again, let me reinforce, I did confirm that what I was experiencing was not COVID-19 or symptoms related, but rather something that chronically I just live with here in South Texas. So I would encourage you to make sure that you check on that first, bring any of that evidence forward, and then, any symptoms that don't change from that, I think that we, like you, like me, and many of us are going to be okay so long as it's nothing out of that ordinary circumstance or condition.
Terry Owen, how will we be teaching students about the protocols when we return to school?
So we are actually doing several things. We are working on sharing our protocols publicly. We're in the middle of a feedback loop internally, and we're going to go through a feedback loop out in the community. But those things will be published for all. So that's one method. Secondly, staff are going to be practicing and training and preparing for all of those protocols and routines together as you reenter. And then we'll have plans for, as students reenter, how we're going to teach those protocols and routines to them before we ever get into teaching and learning. Very similar to how we teach classroom routines. We slow down to speed up in that regard. And then lastly, our campuses are all working on video reentry training modules where it will be for parents and for staff and for students to see before they ever come to school. This is good hand hygiene. This is how you use hand sanitizer. This is how you disinfect. This is when you wash your hands. This is how you wash your hands. This is social distancing. This is how you wear your mask. Here's how you wear it properly. Here's what improper mask wearing looks like, so on and so forth. And so we think a combination of all of those things, and again, a shared responsibility from all of us to make sure that we're constantly reinforcing those appropriate behaviors so that we can see more and more of those consistently being followed. And as we do it consistently as adults, we know there's a fighting chance that our kids are going to do it consistently. And a question that you're not asking here, Terry, that I've been asked many times by parents and other staff during Facebook Lives was, well, what if a kid just resists to wear that mask and resists to follow our safety protocols? And even worse, a parent says, hey, our rights are such that we're not going to do that. Well, our our schools are going to follow those guidelines. And so the fortunate thing is for any that just dig their heels in and aren't willing to play the safety game with all of us, then we'll offer remote learning as their mode of instruction. And that will be when we're face-to-face, obviously. They'll lose that opportunity and have to shift to remote learning if they're presenting an unsafe circumstance for their peers and for all of us. Thanks for the question.
Ms. Gonzalez asked, can you explain exactly how it will look for children from staff? Will they be in classes with students from various grade levels? Will there be someone in the classroom to help with their work? There was a follow-up, and so we could kind of combine it too. How will social distancing be enforced in hallways during class changes?
Yeah, so during class changes, we're talking about when students re-enter, and there's a series of strategies being implemented there with staggered transition times and flow student pattern flows that keep them from crossing one another, and the list goes on. But to Yamali's question about children, staff children who may be able to accompany them to work, given the 10% capacity constraints and exclusively when we're remote, Yamali, what we would be talking about is, yes, multi-age groupings possibly. To the extent possible, I think that there's going to be some autonomy for the group of employees who are bringing their kids to work together to determine their supervision and how they're going to be grouped. And again, working together with campus leadership, because essentially this is not something that the district can support by way of services and instruction by the order. What we're really doing is just providing a space, which is why I wanted to emphasize earlier, this is not quality healthcare, nor is it quality instruction. This is basically as if you had to leave your children at home alone without the ability for you to proctor and support them instructionally, and without you having the ability to provide supervision and childcare. So basically, you're able to bring them to school with you. The mandate requires an 8-foot, or the variance to the mandate requires an 8-foot space between them. Internally, we're saying let's keep those groups of students smaller than 10. There's probably many different ways to group them that make the most sense given the makeup of the group at each campus. But they will be an adult in there supervising, but not necessarily cannot provide direct instruction or academic support. It's just really to make sure that everybody's okay and safe, and that if we need some additional help in those areas, we can get help for them. And of course, as faculty with students in that space, you'll have the ability to rotate through there during your conference periods or and such during times, lunch times, and that to check in on your child. And of course, as their parent, you could certainly support them during those times. So I hope that answered your question. This is something, the variance literally was provided for us yesterday. So those are the best plans that we've come up with at this point. If we can refine those along the way, we will. And again, I want to apologize to everybody on the call, as well as the rest of the employees across the district who are not on the call, that are not going to have this option, because the variance is very clear that it is those that are instructionally essential, moving from inside the classroom gradually outside the classroom.
Sherry has just a suggestion or a comment. I don't think the fountains should be available. You know that students, not all, will follow those instructions.
Thanks, Sherry, for that. I agree with you. I think that if we have, if we're able to staff them and wipe down, disinfect before and after, it's a possibility that, for fear of the risk of dehydration, that it may be an option. As we approach reentry with students, we may have a better solution to ensure that we cover them, shut them down, and don't use them at all. But based on current guidance, they're accessible under those conditions that we've described in our procedures. And again, to the extent possible, we really prefer that students have water bottles in lieu of the fountain. So thanks for that, Sherry. We've definitely talked quite a bit about the same concerns, and we'll continue to whittle away at that as we get closer to actually having students in our buildings.
Kimberly, about paras, will our pre-K paras in the room be in the room with us, and will pre-K be able to do live lessons like other grades?
Ms. Dowds, great question, and I'm glad you asked, because the the guidance in the order, while I understand the intent, doesn't seem to necessarily match our need to provide remote instruction. So, for example, pre-K teachers have paras that assist in the instruction of children that are that young for a reason. We have co-teach and support facilitation environments where teachers teach together due to the wide range of needs and services that students in those environments need. And so the order specifically says that a teacher has to teach from their classroom and be the only person in that classroom. So in strict adherence to the order, in answering your question, we will not be able to be in the room together. I can tell you that that's one of the requests for variance that the district has made. And we're hoping that by the time we get to August 17th, there may be a little bit of discretion or some sort of waivers if we were able to present the nature within which those folks are in the room together to ensure that it rises to the level of all of the conditions for safety. But as of today, Ms. Dowds, the order's pretty clear. But I acknowledge your question, and we're going to keep working on it and see if we can't get a little variance.
I'm going to do another two-parter for you, Mr. Toscano. Will students be provided with school supplies to avoid sharing? And then how will school buses be operating?
So school supply lists have been adjusted to the extent possible to reduce the amount of school supplies that students will need to share with other students, but also to ensure that if students are going to be remote only, that they're not required to purchase school supplies that they will not need in a remote only environment. And so on one hand, we're going to try to prevent and mitigate for the need for students to share supplies, knowing full well that that's impossible to guarantee 100%. So with the minimum number of supplies that will be used by more than one student in any particular block of instruction or within any school day, we'll have protocols for disinfection before and after, in between, if you will, students, the supply moving from one student to another. As far as school buses go, that guidance has been all over the place. We are fully prepared to ensure disinfection protocols are incorporated before and in between and after students on the buses. In most cases, many cases, we have monitors on buses. We will adhere to distancing requirements and capacity requirements as they exist when we deploy transportation. But as you would expect, with no students being allowed face-to-face, that definitely will not happen prior to September 7th. So we're prepared as if we were going to have to open tomorrow and provide transportation with what those guidelines require. But that could change between now and September 7th. And Ms. Gallegos, we will definitely follow all of those requirements and ensure our children and our staff are safe by all means necessary.
Mr. McGinnis, what is the current thinking on computer labs and course-specific equipment?
That is a great question, Mr. McGinnis. And if Shannon is still on the call, you may assist me in this because I know we've talked quite a bit about it. Ashley as well. So if you want to give the latest update on kind of where we landed on computer labs and course-specific equipment, chime in, and then I'll add anything that I can add.
So Amanda answered this in Dr. Holman answered it in the comments, and Mr. McGinnis had already said thank you, but she did say that they are developing the requirements for the course-specific equipment as well as the time and seat time and all of that. So she already responded to that, but you might want to Ashley talk about the computer labs because I don't think she responded to that.
Right. So what we're going to do with computer labs is computers, anything that children may have to share will need to be sanitized before and after each child uses it. So between users, it'll all have to be wiped down. And that's something that, especially at the high school level, we can have the kiddos help with. Mr. McGinnis, we'll have wipes there for y'all in the classrooms, and you'll just have your kiddos wipe it down, everything that they've touched. before the next class comes in. They will also be required to wear face masks, obviously, as well as we've discussed the possibility of them having to wear gloves. So we're in the process of finalizing all of those things, and we'll have more detailed information for you in the next 2 weeks before we get kids back.
I do want to add too, Mr. McGinnis, that TEA, when they had originally talked about return to school, had talked about CTE. Since they changed the guidelines on Friday to remote learning, they have not yet addressed any modifications that might be made to CTE requirements. And so we anticipate that they might have some guidance coming up in the next week or two. So as we get that, Dr. Holman will also let you know.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is a question about how I get a fine little pencil drawing of my headshot like Mr. McGinnis has there. That's pretty sharp.
We can arrange for that.
Yeah.
While I have y'all on, I have some kind of similar questions. When will teachers be required to reach out to their asynchronous learners if parents work and they are not reachable until after 5? Is there a plan or schedule in place of this?
So I'll add that there's a couple options that you'll have. So you can reach out to them, definitely students, through the Google Classroom. So you'll be able to communicate with them two-way through that to give them feedback, if they have questions for you, to provide them support. You could also reach out to them at those blue times that I showed you on the schedules. That'll be before and after. I would say also, just like we're face-to-face, we do have parents that work during the day, and when they want us to call them back, it might be after school. So there might be times that we'll have to reach out to parents before and after school, just like we would in face-to-face, to help meet the needs of our students and answer those questions to make sure that all of our students are successful.
I'll just add to that it's okay if we're a day behind.
Yeah.
Right. So, if I start my morning in the asynchronous block as a secondary teacher, I may be checking my Google Classroom and email correspondence with asynchronous students and families during that time that I may have received at midnight, 10 o'clock at night. Right. And so it's okay to be a day behind, and we can account for their attendance and their engagement and progress. And, as Dr. Fuller was mentioning earlier, uploading our synchronous instruction as one additional tool for asynchronous learners. I mean, it's okay if that's a day behind. I mean, that's the reality of the circumstances that we're in. So, all in all, Ms. Martinez, I think that, we can mitigate the majority of the extended day and evening requirements very similarly to what they would normally look like in a face-to-face traditional school model. But similar to that, there may be times when we got to have a parent phone call later in the evening. But I would say that would be the exception, not the rule, with the schedules that we've created and with the Google platform that we have available. So very good question.
In the same vein, not sure if this was answered when we do return to a mix in person and remote learning, will we have time built into the day to reach students? But I think you guys kind of already touched on that a little bit. Let's see, Alexandria, will that also apply to coaches and assistant coaches? I'm not sure what they mean by will that also apply during PE and athletic periods, having both in the same gym. Also confirming, will students be wearing their masks during PE?
So it seems like Alex has two questions here. One may be referring to the remote period time where the mandate requires one teacher in the classroom by themselves. And of course, in her case and other coaches and PE teachers who work like in a gym, that is their classroom and it's humongous. Do I really need to be by myself in there? And as the mandate is literally written, the answer is yes. Hopefully this would be another example of why that intent doesn't match real application. So hopefully by the time we start August 17th, we'll have a little different guidance on that. And then as far as mastering PE, I'm assuming that question is relating to when students come in face-to-face. And if we were to start tomorrow, given the local mandate, I would say that we would be forced to require some sort of face mask or shield during that time. But I appreciate the question, Alex. I can say that we did have our athletes wear masks during strength and conditioning, particularly when we reopened the second time. And, there are some challenges that come along with that, particularly for students who might have a respiratory condition. So we have some guidance on that, and we're definitely going to push into that a little bit more in light of the question that you posed today. So thank you.
It looks like we have like 3 more. Can we have in writing the different options that we have available for taking days off in case we are sick or have to take off to take care of somebody?
Absolutely. We can put something together. You have 2 places right now, and that is just go to the FFCRA. That is a federal program that gives us options that I shared today. You can download a very detailed explanation of all of those benefits. In addition to that, in your employee handbook, it has all things related to leave and what those options are. Now, what I realize is that that's taking you to 2 different places, and what I'm assuming you're asking, which I would want as well, is something concise, a white paper, something in one place where it's all aggregated so that I can make sense of it all and study it. And so while we create that for you, again, those pieces of information are available to all of you right now by searching for FFCRA, FMLA, and of course going through our handbook and looking at our local leave requirements.
Another question, as a reading teacher, I've been building my classroom library. Will books still be allowed in the classroom when students return?
Shannon, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
So one of the things we've been talking about as well is this idea of a student kit. So when we're out in remote learning, your administrators and curriculum instruction have been talking about what might a student need at home to be successful. We know that some students will have tons of books that they'll be able to read, some may not. So there might be an opportunity for you to create student resource kits, which might include books, workbooks that you have that they would use in the classroom to send home during remote learning, that they can come pick up in the beginning of the school year, so that they will have those tools, so that when they engage with you in Google Classroom, they'll have those at their fingertips. So I would say, yes, you will still need classroom libraries. We're going to have to work with Ms. Colas, and in our procedures, we're going to have how will we sanitize and make sure that those are safe, so that when students are finished reading them, that they can be utilized by other students. The other thing that we're working with is digital access. And so how can students access digital books as well, so that when they're on their computer or through a Google Classroom, they can have books that they can read through the computer as well.
Well, I'll have you both. This one.
Well, let me just also Miss Otis's question. So Miss Otis is a high school teacher as well, so she's definitely going to have quite a few more students. So that's really a good question that maybe part of that answer definitely applies to, but maybe we should think a little bit more about given the number of students that they have at secondary level. So Marva, thank you for that question, and we've noted that, and we'll dig into that a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So I popped the next question up there for you. Will our asynchronous students be assigned a class period? How will attendance work for them?
Go ahead.
No. So asynchronous means they work all on their own. So as long as they complete their assignments and or the things that they're required to do by the end of the day, they'll be counted present. So for remote learning, we do not take attendance by class period, we take attendance by day. We're still waiting for some guidelines on what that exactly looks like and how we record that. But there'll be 3 ways that an asynchronous student can be counted present. One of them is if they make progress in learning in the learning management system, which is Google Classroom. The other second way is if they have some type of face-to-face and or not face-to-face, but live or telephone or some type of communication with the teacher where they're able to demonstrate and or talk about their learning. And the third way is by turning in their assignment. So those are the 3 ways that we can count a student present for that day.
Okay.
More information to come once we figure out what that'll look like in ITEX.
And I think a point of clarification is that students can do a combination of synchronous and asynchronous on any given day as well. And I would imagine that once this is deployed, students are going to figure out that a combination of both may actually work better for them. And I think in most cases, it's going to work better for students, particularly at the secondary level. I think they'll find themselves doing some synchronous work and then some asynchronous work. And so hopefully taken together, we'll have the structure and flexibility we need for students, but also the structure and flexibility for us as classroom teachers as well.
And I'd add too that the synchronous piece is really just for direct instruction. And so a student that participates in synchronous will still have assignments and independent work that they'll have to complete outside of the synchronous classroom.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next one, I'm going to combine because it's protocols. Mr. Toscano, I know we deal with the what ifs all the time. What protocols will we have to address a situation where a student intentionally coughs on another student? How will the parents be notified? And to follow up on protocols, what's the protocols for special education paras?
Well, actually not the same, but I'll make the best of it. The special ed para protocols are the same as all other employees, and I'm going to assume that we're talking about special ed paras maybe in different settings with students who may have different conditions that require, everything from toileting to feeding, etc. And so the guidance there is very specific and varies a little bit more with degrees of intensity and requirements for consistency. And so there will be a very specific training for special education students in those settings as it relates to the specific students they serve and their needs. But outside of that, all of the other employee return to work protocols and safety guidelines will be exactly the same. So it's a bit of an in addition to kind of response. And then as far as students who, intentionally cough on another student, or for that matter, an adult who tries to be silly and intentionally cough on another adult, those are unacceptable conditions and will need to be handled as if it was a possible exposure. And we would deploy our protocol that we would deploy if we were concerned there could have been a exposure or a transmission. And we'll go through that entire protocol. And if in the event there is no exposure and there is no transmission, then we'll handle it as a matter of either employee discipline or student discipline.
This next one, I'm going to bring Ashley back on. So Ashley, be ready. There you are. Let's see. It's about pre-K and tuition. My daughter's attending pre-K through the new pre-K for all program. How will the pre-K tuition be impacted? I will be needing to pay for childcare and don't want to obviously double pay.
So you will not have to double pay. For the fall semester, for those who are in the tuition-based pre-K and have already been accepted and paid their registration fee, there will not be tuition for the fall semester because we cannot predict what's going to happen. We don't know how much face-to-face we're going to be able to provide. And so for the fall, we will not be charging pre-K tuition for our pre-K tuition-based kiddos. And then we'll readdress for the spring.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, that's traditional 4-year-old pre-K. We also have what we traditionally call employee pre-K, which is 3-year-olds. But I also want to re-clarify that as of today, as it relates to employees being able to bring their children, or teachers rather, being able to bring their children with them, it doesn't include employee pre-K 3-year-olds, but it also doesn't include any 4-year-old pre-K at this time. We're working through that. So today it's just children that are school-aged, kindergarten through 5th grade. The rest would need child care. Now, when we re-enter, if you are tuition-based 4-year-old pre-K, at least for the fall semester, we're not intending to charge tuition. As it relates to employee daycare, which is the employee pre-K for 3-year-olds, we had talked about a daily rate and trying to prorate to the extent possible that circumstance so that nobody was having to pay if their child wasn't able to receive the employee child care through that programming.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Mr. Toscano, how are you feeling? Do you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, we can take 2 more. I just would like to go to the restroom and eat before the 5 o'clock Facebook Live, if at all possible.
Yeah, we're gonna do a Facebook Live open to the public at 5 o'clock. So we're gonna just take 2 more, and then we're gonna need to take a break. When school is back in person, how will lunch work?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Deason. So lunch is going to be very different. So staggered lunches are fairly typical. Groups of students who may be eating in the cafeteria will need to be very thoughtful about the capacity requirements and distancing within that capacity threshold, and ensuring protocols for disinfection, sanitization, so on and so forth. But in addition to that, we're gonna have to spread students out throughout the buildings, and students will also, some will be eating in classrooms and in other spaces throughout the building. Again, so a combination of spreading out the locations to make the group smaller, and also staggering the times that students are eating. And the combination of those things, we feel like, regardless of the number of students that we have, as we gradually ramp up to face-to-face and incorporating more and more students who are comfortable coming face-to-face, we think that we can mitigate all of the risk and follow all the guidelines.
All right, so last question actually came in through my email. And then I want to remind people again that we'll be doing a public Facebook Live at 5 o'clock. We have traditionally noticed a spike in cases after national holidays. How will we be monitoring student return and possible infection considering it's Labor Day?
Whoever asked that question, that's a fantastic question, because you're exactly right. We have noticed that trend, and as we re-enter at some point and have some students face-to-face, and we do have national holidays, I think that there's going to have to be a combination of an information campaign, very focused conversations with students leading up to that holiday, and then a campaign throughout in preparing for reentry, and that we should we're going to ask for guidance for protocols for reentry. And of course, one of those protocols that will continuously be expected is that parents are going to check their child's temperature and do the self-screening of their children every day before they bring them to school. And if they meet any of those conditions, they're not to bring them to school and notify us immediately. And so returning from holidays will not change that protocol. We'll just make sure we really push information about that requirement. But in that information campaign, I think that it would include facts about holidays and how those traditionally involve social gatherings and family gatherings and travel and all of those sorts of things that when those times come, given the current context of positive cases in the area and in the nation, we'll want to share that information and remind people what the guidance is from healthcare providers at that time, whether that is a no travel recommendation or travel with caution, or whether that's a no groups larger than 10 or no groups larger than 100 precaution, because we've seen all of those. So as we ramp up to those holidays, I think that, an information campaign that we put out through Marcom, but also an information campaign that then we spiral from all of us leading up through and as we return. So that was a fantastic question, and I've thought out loud here about it, but we'll make sure we incorporate those procedures and also seek additional guidance to see if there's any additional medical advice for that particular reentry during those high peak times.
And that actually came from Laura Galindo. So Laura, thank you for.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Laura.
So we're gonna wrap this up as we're at 2 hours and we need a break, but we'll be back at 5 for a Facebook Live open to the public. And I noticed there was a couple of more questions in there, but we could certainly answer. I'll make a note of them and we can answer them at the beginning of the Facebook Live at 5, if that works.
Well, yeah, we'll do that. And again, reach out to your principals, reach out to your leadership team. Any clarifying questions, additional comments, suggestions, recommendations, please feed those through your leadership team, because they have contact with me on a daily basis, and that will inform our future correspondence, but also some of those answers I may be able to send right back to you through them. And that would be a great line of instant two-way communication. So again, I do have contact with your principals on a daily basis.
All right. All right. So that's it for this time. Like I said, I invite you all to participate at the Facebook Live at 5 o'clock. And thank you for joining us. This YouTube video stays alive. So if you need to go back and rewatch it or refer it to other colleagues, you can. So
Hey, Brandon.
Yes.
Look what I got.
Oh, man, already? Well, that was quickly.
That's amazing. Thank you, Amanda Smith.
Yeah, there you go.
I appreciate that.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Talk to y'all soon.